Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Hellbent, chapters 26, 27, and 28. In these chapters, we get to find out exactly what happened with all of our little characters, the scholar, the priest, the soldier we know about, and the prince. And their stories are pretty fucking compelling. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Joanna for commissioning this episode. Appreciate you a lot. I am really, really excited about this episode. I just really had been... This isn't what I was expecting. I didn't think that we would find out how these murders happened, how each of these people committed a murder. I know about what happened with Dawes, but nevertheless, she hasn't talked about it very much, and it's just sort of been an interesting thing to see the way that's avoided. And I should have realized this author definitely seems to want to allow our main character to experience what's going on instead of like just watching or hearing about it. So I should have realized that there was probably going to be a method like this where she fell into their memories somehow. But we haven't seen this happen with other people who are still alive. This is only something that we have seen happen when she takes in a gray. So I just didn't really consider this. So let's start off with chapter 26. And they're getting everything set up before midnight. They have managed to like duck out of the party, and they are over at the library and they're getting things set up. They are using the Tempest in a teapot to make sure that the cameras don't pick them up while they wait for the whole place to close down. And I really enjoy hearing what everybody is wearing. Alex is wearing Lethe sweats because she's really sick and tired of her perfectly good clothing getting ruined, and I appreciate that foresight. Tripp had worn the same polo blazer and backward cap he'd had on at their planning dinner, which I don't know why, but I did not remember that he was wearing a backward cap, and for some reason that makes this whole thing so much more Jason Mendoza to me. I'm telling you guys, that's who I keep picturing. Turner was in what looked like expensive gym clothes and a puffer jacket. Dawes was in her sweats. Mercy had chosen fatigues paired with a black sweater and looked like the chicest member of a special forces unit. So, they're sitting here in the dark and getting things set up, and Mercy has to get settled with her salt armor and everything. She even has a salt sword, which I'm having trouble picturing. When Mercy pulled a vial of Hiram's elixir from her pocket, Alex wanted to swat it out of her hand, but the time for warnings and worry had passed. Mercy had made her choice, and they needed her here. And I appreciated this. Like, I just keep really liking how practical Alex is. Like, she is just, even in the midst of kind of feeling a way about things, she can stop and be like, why am I like this? Why am I reacting this way? This is super not helpful right now. And we can't control our initial feeling and emotional reaction to things, but we can step back and look at them in a real way and be like fair to ourselves about it. And I just always appreciate when somebody has the self-awareness to like take that step back. So in this moment, she's thinking, I don't want her to do this, but she also has to be like, she's a grown-up. She has decided. We have told her everything about what's about to happen. And there is a point at which Mercy is looking pretty nervous. And Alex is like, good, because there has been a sort of sense for her that Mercy isn't taking it seriously enough and doesn't really appreciate what could go wrong. And I can't help but imagine that's exactly true. I mean, there's no way to predict the kinds of things that Alex has seen. Like, she's told Mercy about stuff, yes. But that doesn't necessarily translate, to like really getting it. So this whole thing is, there's this moment where they have to commingle their blood, and Tripp's like, we should have cut across our hands, and Turner's like, shut the fuck up. Like, Turner is so impatient with Tripp, which I definitely understand. And when he turns out to have his gun on him, Alex says to him, like, I don't really think that's going to do you much good. To which Turner says, couldn't hurt. And I have to agree. Look, will it do any good? Likely not. Am I mad at him for picking any weapon that he can? Not at all. Frankly, in my opinion, the fact that he has this is an argument in my favor of him being the soldier rather than the priest. However, I do get that he does his scripture quoting and everything later. I just personally, I don't know. I just, that's not enough for me. That's all I'm saying. I still feel the way I feel. And I really do. I haven't heard from anybody on this, but I really do want to know if I am alone in this, because it just seemed like such a given, and I'm still sort of paying attention to that and fixated on it a little bit, not gonna lie to you. So they use their blood. The heavy wooden door beneath the Egyptian scribe had vanished, leaving nothing but darkness. No glimpse of the library nave beyond, no sign of life or light. It was like looking into nothing. A cold wind blew through on a moan. Oh, said Dawes. They stood in stunned silence, and Alex realized that for all their talk and preparation, none of them had really believed it would work. Despite every miracle and horror she had witnessed in her time at Yale, she hadn't been able to buy into a pathway to the underworld hidden right beneath their noses. Had some other group of fools once stood at this doorway, awakened by their blood on this same precipice, trembling and afraid? And Alex goes through, but at first there's nothing. It doesn't, there's no change, really. And she gets knocked into by Dawes coming right behind her. This is your station, Dawes whispered, the first words any of them had spoken since they'd stepped back into Sterling. Tripp's jaw was set. His fists were clenched. Alex could see he was shaking slightly. She almost expected him to just turn on his heel and march right out of the library. Instead, he gave a single firm nod of the head. Alex gave him a quick squeeze on the shoulder. It was not easy to take Tripp seriously. But he was here facing the same shapeless dread as the rest of them, and he hadn't complained once. And I do appreciate this being specifically mentioned, because you guys know, that I was sort of wondering whether or not he was going to manage to do this or have some doubts, raise some questions. And there is a point when he finds out that they have to basically die, that he's like, okay, but are we sure this is a good idea? And he honestly, that was the only time that he said anything of the kind. And I was like waiting for this to become more of an issue. And he just kind of doesn't even seem to question that this is part of the deal. And once you find out what he did, part of me is thinking maybe he feels like this is penance that he has to perform. I feel, even though he doesn't exactly think he did the wrong thing, and for the record, I definitely don't think he did the wrong thing, I still think there is some guilt tied up in that. Sometimes the fact that you don't feel guilty is what makes you feel guilty, if you get what I mean. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was just a big part of him that's sort of like, yeah, I have to do this. This is my past catching up with me. The only reason I'm here is because I killed somebody, and I deserve to be put through something that's low-key traumatic. And do I agree with that? Not really. Maybe, but not necessarily. You know what I'm saying? And I am really impressed with the way that he has like been fleshed out. I wanted there to be a little more to him than we saw. And I really, really am pleased at the depth he has to him. Not only that he has it, but that Alex sees it. And, you know, she's had a lot of contempt for him, and some of that is certainly deserved. But compared to what I had thought, my thoughts were that Turner would have killed somebody in the line of duty. I didn't even necessarily think it was a bad guy. Alex assumes that it's, oh, what, did he kill a bad guy? Boo-hoo. I was pretty sure that wasn't it. However, I didn't think it was going to be a fellow officer. I definitely didn't think it was going to be like a purposeful choice that he sits there and weighs his options and then he makes it. Like, that was a total surprise. But Tripp, completely out of left field. Tripp is over here. I said on the show, I'm assuming it's drunk driving. I fully expected the death he had caused to have been because of his own foolishness. And she says something herself about how probably Tripp wandered into something like over his head that he couldn't handle, which isn't exactly what I said, but it's a similar idea of just like he kind of lost the thread and got clumsy and fucked up. And it was just like this thing that happened accidentally as a side effect of his own actions and wasn't actually what he set out to do. And it turns out it is not that simple. And I am always here for the answer that is not that simple. So they take their places, and they have a moment here of Dawes and Alex talking about the niches being empty and why that is. And her, you know, Alex uses this moment to kind of comfort Dawes, but she has to go on her own. And this is so cool how this is done. She arrives at the glass door that leads to her courtyard. "We're coming for you, Darlington," she whispered. Once more, she touched the porcelain box in her pocket. And she steps through. And it's this wild moment. She can hear the metronome. She saw Mercy, her face panicked, trying not to tip over. They were all stumbling now, the stones of the courtyard buckling beneath them, but still the metronome ticked away. And the basin overflows with water. Alex is like, oh, it's not blood. I really expected it to be blood. But then when the water hits her boots, it's hot and it smells like sulfur. And she's like, okay, there it is. And Dawes' teeth were dug into her lower lip. Tripp was nodding as if he heard secret music, a psych-up song from some collection of jock jams. All right, look, there's no need to get personal. I'll tell you what, everybody out there, if you ever want to buy me a CD, you really just can't go wrong with jock jams for me. I'm just saying, I am very basic in this way. I like music that psychs me up and gives me energy. That tends to be what I listen to. Some people listen to stuff that makes them feel emotional. I really do try to avoid that if I can. I'm emotional enough. I'm good. But jock jams is just kind of it's a mix of old and new, and it's always dancey, and it's just a good time. So yeah, go ahead. It's fine. And a wind rose suddenly, the cold wind they'd all felt rushing through the darkness. Now it shook the courtyard trees and rattled the windows in their casements. And they clasp the basin, and they start to sink. They're like on their backs in the water, and she feels hands wrapping around her and dragging her, and their fingers pressing into her throat, in her ears. They're pressing between her legs. And I was like, this is really, really horrifying. Like, I didn't have a particular expectation, but I think that when I first heard Buried Alive, I assumed they were going to be laying down literally like with dirt poured over them. I gradually realized that was likely not how it would go, but this, no, not even a little bit. Here it is. Turner had brought down a bad guy in the line of duty, and it still tormented his Eagle Scout conscience. Dawes had killed Blake to save Alex's life. Muddle-headed Tripp had no doubt bumbled into something he couldn't handle. She was the problem. She had always been the problem, the only real sinner in the bunch. Alex was the real thing. And, to a degree, her murdering those guys was much, much more brutal. However, I'm really, really curious. If she saw all of their murders, they saw her murdering. Did they see how she took Helly into her? Like, do they get how that happened? I'm really curious if they understand the layers of things there, because she is Helly at one point. Do they all see Helly? Are they all part of Helly? Like, how much of how that worked did they get? Turner had already suspected Alex killed them. So now he knows. And he also knew that she needed another murderer and that she was like also a murderer. So that was an easy connection to make. But in terms of how it worked, I'm sure he had no idea how that could happen. And now, what does he think of this? So she opens her eyes finally. She tried to sit up. Slowly, she began to see shapes emerge in the dark. And this is when she is suddenly Alice. And it's awful in her head because Alice got hit so hard that it feels like she definitely actually lost the thread for a minute. Alex, or not Alex, I'm sorry. I keep saying Alex when I mean Dawes. Dawes got hit so hard that it seems like she lost the thread. There's like moments where she's trying to put together what she had been doing and what happens now, and genuinely is like confused about what day it is. And then finally she remembers and that she is supposed to be ordering pizza, but the door is still open. She's on the ground and her head hurts. And that takes her a little while too, to like put two and two together here. And finally she's like, oh, wait a second. Somebody shoved me. But you guys, even here, even then, it's not like I got attacked by a bad guy. She is thinking somebody had knocked her, an accident. She was clumsy. She'd gotten in the way, which I gotta say, that fucking broke my heart. I don't know what it is about the way this is written and the combination of things here, but the fact that her immediate assumption is that she was likely knocked aside for a very good reason that she deserved. That really hurt me inside. I was so like, and then you find out from in her head that Dawes has spent her whole life afraid, is the way that she puts it. And it all begins to kind of make sense that she's seeing things this way. Let's see. Here it is. So she is not sure about Alex when she turns up. She felt a certain consolation when their new Dante arrived, and she got her first look at the scrawny girl with her bowstring arms and hollow eyes. Although she never asked anything of Dawes, she never gave her orders or made demands. She cleaned up her own messes and skulked around like a rat who was afraid of being noticed by the barn cats. Pam had felt restless, useless, and grateful all at once. And then he disappeared, and Dawes hadn't been able to forgive this girl who charged through the world like an unintended consequence, a calamity for everyone and everything around her. And I was like, wow, that's really rude, but also accurate. And I'm sure Alex would like 100% agree with her. I don't even think Alex would argue. That sounds correct. Dawes even says, like, Darlington didn't see she was dangerous. And I'm like, wild that you did, though. You knew she was dangerous. And granted, you say you're afraid of everything, but still, being afraid and saying somebody is dangerous are not the same thing. So finally, we have her, like, piecing things together, and the jackals and the blood, and her looking at Alex with this guy who was on top of her. He was beautiful, an angel with golden curls and the loveliest face she'd ever seen. He was weeping, trembling. They looked like lovers. He had his hands in Alex's hair as if he meant to kiss her. And then there was something in Pam's hands, too, warm and softly furred and squirming, a living thing. She could feel its heartbeat against her palms. No, it was just a piece of sculpture, cold and lifeless, the bust of Hiram Bingham III. I don't know what the deal is with this rabbit popping up the way that it does as the murder weapon. Like it keeps being the thing. But obviously this ties with the image on the cover, because I was wondering what the deal was with the cover having this white rabbit on it. So I don't know if that's supposed to be part of the, Alice going through the looking glass kind of thing. But the only connection that we really get is to Helly having a pet rabbit, but I don't even really get how that would work as a stand-in for the murder weapon in all of these scenarios. She was a little girl on the playground, too tall, heavy-breasted, built all wrong. Her clothes didn't fit. She got tangled in her own feet. She was huddled at the bus stop, trying not to react as boys from the high school drove by, shouting, "Show us your tits." She was choosing the back row of every classroom, hunched up in the corner, afraid. She'd spent her whole life afraid. And for those of you who have seen the TV show The Magicians, I didn't realize this until a short time ago, and I found it really funny when she says, like, heavy-breasted, because I'm not sure if we've gotten that from her description on Alex's end, but I kept picturing her as the girl who plays Alice, and Alice is a real, scholarly type with big boobs, but she keeps it sort of under wraps in these, sweater vest and cardigan outfits. So yeah, I was like, when it mentioned that she's heavy-breasted, I was like, I didn't know that, but that was already what was in my head, weirdly. And she's thinking about how she isn't like Alex or Darlington, and that she's really timid, and she's supposed to come up here and fucking save Alex's life, and she doesn't think she can do it. But then she does it. She hadn't meant to hit him so hard, or had she? And then all of a sudden, she's on a ship. Try to keep up, Tripp. This one was really hard to read. And I read this section of chapters twice, and I will admit I skipped through some of this one on the second try because I was just so disturbed by it. Excuse me, guys. Still getting this allergy thing. But I can deal with bad people with selfish motives. It's gross, but there's a logic there that I can understand. When you have people who just enjoy hurting because they like watching pain, that starts getting into territory that is completely impossible for me to wrap my head around. I can know that it is a thing. I can acknowledge that as a motivation because I know that is a reality, but I can't personally get myself to understand it, and I can't watch it. Pain is not something that I like to see. And it is just a really ugly section. So Tripp has this cousin named Spencer, and this is really heartbreaking. It's well done too, because, with Tripp and his sort of magical life, growing up super rich with this family that has all this money and really getting a lot of things sort of handed to him, you have a hard time thinking about like what could have gone wrong for him. And it's not to say I don't think rich people have their own problems, but those problems are difficult for me to sympathize with a lot of the time. And here we've got a really simple one. Spencer is a bully and a sadist. And poor Tripp doesn't know how to handle himself around him. And I love this description. When Spencer joined them, it got weird. It was like his brain just stopped doing what it was told. His feet and hands felt bigger. He got slower. Suddenly he had to think, really think about his left and his right, port and starboard, which was fucking ridiculous. He'd been sailing since he was a kid. And this is the kind of thing that I deeply understand. There are people in our lives that do this to us, whether they are bullies, whether they're family, sometimes one and the same. I had this with some bosses that I had when I worked at a bakery, and for whatever reason, I fucked up on the first day, and they made it really clear how much contempt they had for me on that fuck up. And I was like never able to recover. And every day after that, when I went into work, I was fucking up basic shit that I had done in my sleep with no problem at home and at work, or at other jobs. But suddenly when I was with them, I just like couldn't do anything right. And I had to think about everything. And it's because you are so distracted by trying to monitor what they're doing and thinking and saying and how they're acting. And especially in this case, his safety is genuinely on the line. Spencer has tried to kill him one time. So it is no surprise to me that a lot of his mental like CPU is going to be dedicated to monitoring where this guy is and the way he's behaving to keep himself safe. And it's not going to be available to him to use for his basic stuff that he's used to doing without thinking about it. And Spencer is like apparently really charming, and Tripp knows that his own parents even like Spencer better than him. And I really felt for him on the fact that he knows his parents prefer Spencer. And also the fact that, like, I wonder if after this happens, his parents treated him differently because they blamed him. And also how easy it is for people like Spencer. They know, I think, that they are different and that there's something like off about themselves. So they shore up against the inevitable accusations that will follow some of their behaviors by being extra charming out of the gate. And this is what I think a lot of people fail to understand about abusers. There are so many, you guys, there are so many abusive men out there who you could like take every person that knew them best in their life other than their wife and ask, did you know he was capable of this? And they would all be like, he's the nicest guy I ever met. He would give you the shirt off his back. He was just one of those people. They would swear up and down, of course he wasn't capable of that. I don't believe her. And it's like, you don't understand that you're a piece of the illusion he has set up, because he knows he has to have this. This is part of the essentials for him getting out of the trouble he is going to make, is putting people in place that think they know him really well and will vouch for the fact that he is just not the type and doubt the word of the woman who's being abused. And you just see this over and over and over again. And people keep thinking they know a guy really well. And it's just so, it's honestly, for me, there's an arrogance to that of just like, you haven't lived with him. And until you live with somebody, you don't know. And not even live with like a couple weeks. You need to live with them for a time and see the ups and downs and then talk to me. So this whole thing with how much he's gotten everybody around him to like him is just really how it works, you know? And, we then get this like bit with Tripp when he was 8 years old. It's his birthday. And Spencer comes up to him in the pool. We get this really beautiful description of like what a great day it's been and that it's the weekend and how like golden everything feels. And then Spencer has to come and fucking ruin it. And he basically pins Tripp to the bottom of the pool and then starts to grind his foot into Tripp's crotch and basically is about to drown him until somebody looks and sees, and Tripp is like, Spencer has to rescue him and make it look like Tripp was just drowning on his own. And Tripp has the opportunity to say it was Spencer, but Spencer is standing right there and looking at him, and he doesn't tell. And later on, he's like, nobody would have believed me. And I really felt so... There was something about the fact that his situation is so... when it comes right down to it, so similar to Alex's, in that nobody will believe Alex and what she went through either, for very different reasons. Like, they're totally different scopes, you know. Alex can see dead people and Tripp is being bullied by his cousin, but nevertheless, the feeling that nobody is going to believe you, what a horrific place to be. So Alex, like, I bet has a lot more sympathy for him with this. So he comes out of this knowing that this is a guy who would have let him die if nobody turned to see him, and actively was trying to kill him. So on this this boat in the present, what I like too, the fact that Tripp sees Spencer's mother in the background watching Spencer with this look on her face, and he's like, oh, she knows what he's like. And he thinks about at some point how he had saw Spencer like feed their dog food that was covered in like pepper, like cayenne pepper or something, and how hard Spencer had laughed. Just like, you know, indicators that he likes watching people be in pain. He's hurting an animal, like, for what reason? Just because he enjoys that. So he sees Spencer, who is grabbing a trailing line from underneath the back of the sailboat, and he should ask for help and have somebody hold him, but he doesn't ask. And he had made fun of Tripp for wearing a fucking life vest because it was just raining, whatever, you idiot. But then a wave just swoops up and scoops him right over the side. And it's like this really quick, kind of silent thing. And nobody else notices. And Tripp has a moment where he could call for help and they could turn around and get him. But he doesn't. And then enough time passes that they could still turn around. But Tripp would then be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? What took you so long? And Tripp knows that if Spencer is angry and demands that of him in front of Tripp's father, it's going to turn into a whole thing that makes Tripp look even worse. And so he just doesn't say anything, and he lets Spencer drown. And this is one where I'm 100% like, Alex killing Blake, or not Alex, again, fuck. Dawes killing Blake, that is the correct thing to do. She saved Alex's life, and Blake was a rapist and a piece of shit. He deserved to die. I don't care if I'm not, like, supposed to be able to make those kinds of claims. He did. End of story. Killing Spencer, the right thing to do. He was a sadist and an abuser and a monster and a bully. And I have no doubt he would have gone on to do even more horrific, fucked up stuff. Who knows if he had tried to kill this kid when he was 8 and this much time has passed, what other stuff he's done. I wouldn't doubt that he's killed other people and he's just like such a golden boy that nobody suspected. How many women has he like beaten up? You know, he strikes me as a real Ariel type. And then we go to Turner, and this is a real interesting one. He is with Carmichael, who is another detective and somebody who's kind of a legend, called Big Car a lot of the time. And I really appreciate the author being very real about Turner's position in all of this as a black man, and the fact that he's like ambitious and wants to change things from the inside and is serious about that, but also how he has to like toe the line and be really careful about the way that he behaves. And that's not just because he's black, but also because he's moody, and he knows that that can come out and push people away. And because the job depends so much on people liking you on a personal level and getting invited to certain things and let into the club, he has to be extremely genial on the surface in a way that is believable, that he doesn't feel. And so what this feels like for me a little bit is maybe masking, like maybe Turner is a bit neurodivergent and he knows that the masking is required and he does it, but it's not natural. He doesn't feel the way he's letting people think he feels. And also, he has this sense that Carmichael is getting close to him and taking him under his wing because it makes Carmichael look good to be buddies with a black man. And that also makes a lot of sense. But he's like willing to deal with that, you know, because he's like, fine, I'll take that role as long as it gets me where I want to go. And the morning of this killing, Carr has been acting really weird and twitchy, and Turner has been wondering what's going on and thinking like, is he high? Is he on something? I think it's just nerves once we find out what's going on, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was also on something. And Carmichael tells him that I got a tip from a CI that the King Tut, who's like some dude who's supposed to be involved in all of these burglaries, is hiding out in this like abandoned apartment building or something. And so they're heading over there, but Turner has this like weird feeling about the whole thing. And it says from the time he was a kid, Turner had an ear for trouble coming. He could spot an undercover without even trying, always knew when a black and white was about to round a corner. His friends thought it was spooky, but his father told him it meant he was a natural detective. Turner liked that thought. He wasn't particularly good at sports or art or school, but he did have a sense for people and what they might do. He knew when someone was sick, like he could smell it on them. He knew when someone was lying, even if he wasn't sure how he knew. He'd just get that prickle at the back of his skull that told him to pay attention. He learned to listen to that feeling, and that if he kept smiling, kept the darkest parts of his heart hidden, people really liked talking to him. He could get his mom or his brother or his friends or even his teachers to tell him a little more than they'd set out to tell. And this is a really like, I'm really curious if there's something special about Turner because of all of this, you know, not necessarily that he's on anything on the level of Alex, but I don't know. There's something I feel like. So ever since he joined the force, he'd been on high alert, like he was always sure something bad was about to happen. He didn't know how to sort that kind of paranoia from actual alarm. So this whole thing boils down to the fact that Carmichael has set this whole thing up. And he doesn't know it until he comes up the stairs and there is a dead young man, maybe 20 years old, maybe. And Carmichael is trying to say he had something in his hand, he surprised me, but the wound is like dead center in the kid's chest, like he was facing Carmichael and just wait, like it's not compatible. And also, there is nothing in the house to indicate the kid was squatting here either. There's no bed, there's no blankets, there's no food, there's no nothing. So all of this looks like the kid was here to meet Carmichael and knew he was coming, and that's why he didn't run when they knocked. And he gives Turner a fucking gun that he picked up at a scene and tells him to wipe it. Ambulance is going to be here soon. Rat Squad and the rest. Don't screw around, Turner. And Turner says you can't be serious. And is finally beginning to put the pieces together. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I get it. You're setting me up. And at first, he's like, is it because I'm the black guy? Like, why did he pick me? And finally decides, It was because I'm ambitious. And he knows that I'm going to take a few knocks to get ahead and take some risks and fall into line. And this is just like, all of a sudden, when he says, you set this up, Carmichael is like, not denying it. He's just like, well, I mean, maybe, but come on. You know how proud your family is of you. You're not going to be the only one who feels the heat if you don't take this. And all of a sudden Turner's like, oh, okay. So now he's threatening my family. And, then when in the end, Turner says, so you're not going to let us get jammed up. You know your way around doing this. And he says, I've got you. There was Turner's answer, loud and clear. He'd been on one side of the law, and now he was firmly planted on the other. How long had it taken? 30 seconds? A minute? You're one of the good ones, Carr said, his eyes kind. And I am assuming he's talking about one of the good black men. That's what I'm like, right? That's definitely what he means. You'll come back from this. You're right, said Turner, taking his first steps away from the rules he'd always understood and abided by. He didn't know if he'd come back from this, but Carr wouldn't. Turner rose and shot Chris Carmichael twice in the chest. Big Carr didn't even look surprised. It was like he'd always known, like he'd been waiting, just the same way Turner had for something bad to happen. He didn't so much fall as sit down and then slump to the side. And I appreciate that he apologizes to Dellen Tuttle, King Tut, not to his partner. Only then did he realize that sense of foreboding was gone. No prickle, no fear. They'd done all they could to him. And I like that. That's how he's feeling here. That's how Tripp is feeling after his cousin is dead. That's not necessarily the feeling with Alice because, oh my God, I called her Alice. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Like, I am really bad with Dawes' name. She doesn't seem like a Pam to me, and I'm picturing Alice from The Magicians, which I think is why I keep calling her Alex. Ugh. Anyway. But, she didn't have this overall sense of doom hanging over her. And then we go into Helly's head, and we see her we're in her head as she is a gray, watching Alex wake up and realizing that she's dead. And I really appreciate the mention of how, like, she thinks that she had expected that this, like, pretty rough way she's been living was just a temporary thing, and that she would be able to just get her life back together again. Which makes sense that she was willing to risk what she did, thinking that it was just, like, gonna tide her over, I guess. But we see that she had parents who loved her. She had a life that was pretty good. And I'm really wondering about what sent her down this particular path, because she seems herself a little bit confused about what went wrong. And she is like wandering away and not really in the room paying attention to what's going on until Ariel giggles. And that brings her back into herself in this way, because he was giggling when he was raping her. And she just pours into Alex and is picturing like being on the softball mound, like swinging. And it's like interposed with what's going on with taking down Len and all of the rest. And then we have, only then when the last word had been spoken, does she notice there's a rabbit in the middle of the room sitting on the blood-soaked carpet. Babbitt Rabbit, Helly whispers. I thought you were dead. She picks him up, seeing the red smears her hands leave on his soft white sides. We're all dead. For a second, Helly is sure the rabbit is speaking to her, but when she looks up, she sees Alex. The old living room at Ground Zero is gone. The blood, the bits of brain, the broken bat. Alex is standing in an orchard full of black trees. Helly wants to warn her not to eat the fruit that grows on them, but she's already floating, fading away. Not even a shrug now. Going. And I don't understand what it was. Helly inside Alex this whole time? Like, because Helly isn't in the afterworld. Or maybe Alex just didn't make an effort to find her. She hasn't seen her in any case. And there, just the whole thing with Babbitt Rabbit. I don't know what's going on there. So they're in this like wild orchard, and the trees are like black. The fruit is this really dark purple. There are black beehives with golden bees on them, and the sky is like this like dark, like the mottled purple of a bruise, I think is what it's described as. And they are each wearing clothing that like sort of befits what their title is for this whole trip. And I really do like that in the midst of everything, Alex will still feel the murder weapon in her hands when she talks to each of them that they used. I'm realizing that I only have like 10 minutes left to get through the whole rest of this, and I'm very irritated about that. I'm so sorry. But like, there's so much about their respective murders that I didn't want to leave out. So she heard someone singing and realized it was coming from a mirror set into a large elliptical basin of smooth gray rock. And it's Mercy, and she is singing Little Earthquakes by Tori Amos. Good choice. The whole song was death words. Alex could hear the metronome ticking steadily away behind Mercy's tune. So they're looking around, and they're basically in New Haven. They're in front of Sterling. And they have to head over to Black Elm. And the whole way there, time feels really weird. The light is really weird. The turns and twists are not quite the same as they should be. And Tripp is starting to get a little agitated and be like, shouldn't we leave a trail of something behind us because we could get lost? And there's not really anything to be done at this point. You know, they're in it here. And they reach Black Elm. And it is a ruin. This is a really rough thing. The house wasn't visible because it wasn't a house anymore, just a forlorn pile of rubble. And this is when Turner tells Alex to look back really slowly, and they realize that there are wolves following them. And they're not quite regular wolves. They don't look right. And they've got blood around their mouths. And she's like, oh boy. So, she was pointing at the ruins of Black Elm. There was Darlington as she remembered him. Handsome and human in his long dark coat. No horns, no glowing tattoos. He had a rock in his hands, and as they watched, he lugged it over to what might have been the beginning or end of a wall and laid it carefully atop the other stones. I love this. His version of hell is constantly, desperately trying to build Black Elm up again, which is like basically what he had been doing in life. He got manacled to this fucking building and could never escape it, even in death. That is just really rude. And when Darlington spoke, she'd seen the whole scene waver. The ruin of Black Elm, the bruised sky, Darlington himself. She saw dark night and a well of yellow flame, heard people crying out, and saw a great golden demon with curling horns towering over all of it. She heard it speak. Alagnoth Groraneth. Nothing but a growl, but she could sense the words in it. None go free. And nobody else saw this. So she's kind of like, why am I the only one? Did I imagine this? Like, what the fuck? So they're really in hell. It's just they're in like this little subset of hell, especially for him. And I really wonder about how this works. Like, I'm wondering if the next time she comes, she's going to have to deal with the hell that's behind the illusion instead. So she takes the rubber boot box out of her pocket, and Darlington doesn't pay any attention to it. And she's trying to be like, did I pick the wrong thing? Like, I really thought this would work. Danny, she said, and it was not just her voice, but the old man's as well, a gruff harmony. Danny, come home. Darlington's shoulders slumped, his head bowed. The rock slid from his hands. When he looked up, his eyes met hers, and in them she saw the anguish of 10,000 hours, of a year lost to suffering. She saw guilt in them, too, and shame. And she understood. That gold demon was Darlington, too. He was both prisoner and guard here in hell, tortured and torturer. I knew you'd come, he said. And he bursts into blue flame, and it runs right into the box and rattles, and she can tell it's his soul. She's got it. And I have to be honest, I was startled that it was this easy. But of course it wasn't really this easy. Of course it wasn't. I was just like, oh, word? There it is. And I'm really hoping that the box itself didn't get destroyed in the journey back, because they keep having to find things that mean something to him. And I just don't really see why this has to be destroyed too. Can't we just like get a second shot with this thing? I don't like the idea of coming back here though, frankly. So when she has it, she looks down and her street clothes are back. She is no longer wearing the armor, and everybody is like, wait, what happened? Why did it disappear? And she turns around and nothing that they walked through is still there. And the wolves are coming closer. And all of a sudden she sees in the puddle that there's somebody with Mercy, and he's arguing with her, and the metronome has stopped. And I was just like, I have no idea who this could be. My feeling was that it was the vampire, but I don't feel like he'd talk to Mercy. I feel like he'd just attack Mercy. You know, I don't know if he came upon this and the person who's of interest to him is Alex, he wouldn't assume that this Alex body like floating is going to be alive, right? That because they're all like in the pool. So I would think he would come upon the scene and think she was dead already. But yeah, I don't know. The only thing that I can think is that it's like the Preater. I don't know. I don't know. Or it could be Dawes's like, or not Dawes, Darlington's demon self, like interfering somehow, got loose. I don't know how that would work. I don't know. So let's see, I'm not letting go, but her voice sounded distant and she heard someone, maybe something laughing. It wanted her here. And Darlington winds up jumping fucking back out of the box and defends them from the wolves. And he says, you found me once, you'll find me again. And I was like, I cannot believe you are expecting her to just go through this again. That is really, really mean. I get it. You're saving their lives and everything, but like, for fuck's sake, dude. And then Turner starts quoting scripture to try and protect them. And the fucking wolves start quoting it back. And he is like, what the fuck? And I said to myself, that's what they've always said about the devil. The devil knows the Bible front to back. Like, you know? And let's see, back to back, everyone with me. She had no idea what she was doing, but she had to try something. So they all go back to back, and she's got her, you know, like weird ability that she's surrounded by blue flame throughout this, and nobody is really sure what's going on with her. She hasn't explained anything, of course. So she like manages to sort of use that to keep back the wolves, and then the ground begins to shake. And we get this bit here. And it's from Rudolph Kitcher, and the first entry is from his diary, basically about like, yeah, we should go to hell. We should go and explore it. Why are we being such fucking babies? And the next installment is like, wow, I fucked up. Oh my God, you guys, I just realized I said that I would read 28. I said 28 in my intro. Did I read it? Oh, did I read this? I did read this. Oh my God. I had a moment, you guys. I really thought that I didn't read it. Oh, okay. So I'm over here talking about like, I don't know who this is, but I just needed to jog it. I said I read this twice, but I think on my second read, I only read 26 and 27. I think that's why I got confused just now. So yeah, they have managed to come out, and it's fucking Anselm here. This shit is bleak. So Mercy is fine, thank God, but they are Mercy had to stop the metronome. She didn't know what else to do. Fucking this dude is so self-righteous, but he could have gotten them all killed if Alex hadn't done what she did. Like, was that what he wanted? Did he want her to die? Is that why he had her stop the thing? Was he hoping that they'd get stuck there? Like, what the fuck? I love that he's like, you won't track mud on these floors. Take off your shoes. I'm like, dude, seriously, get your fucking priorities straight. He calls a cab for Tripp, and Tripp is like, I don't have any money, and he has to pay for his cab. Mercy takes off the salt armor and just stands there awkwardly. And finally, like, I love this so much. Alex sends Mercy away. Alex shoved the armor into the soaked canvas tote they'd brought with them. She saw the luminaries were in there too. Anselm must have retrieved them. Tripp waved as he headed out the door. Mercy backed slowly away as if waiting for some sign from Alex to stay, but all Alex could do was shrug. This was it. At least she hadn't lost the Arlington rubber boots box. Oh, okay, good. Thank God. So Anselm is basically like, you fucking told me you weren't going to do this. And he says something about, I love when he like tells Turner that he is relieved of duty as the, what do you call it? I'm trying to find the spot here. Detective Turner, you're hereby relieved of your duties as Centurion. Oh no. Anything but that. Anselm's face flushed. If you save your breath, I'm going to miss the extra cash, and that's about it. This is the first real thing I've seen Lethe or any of you wand-waving, cloak-wearing hacks try to do. Say what you want, but these two don't back down from a fight. And I love this because Alex finds herself standing up straighter and kind of feeling like proud of herself and glad that he's proud of her. I really love this so much. And when they tell him that they found Darlington and could have gotten him back if he hadn't interrupted, he doesn't even seem to really care. He's not even invested in that. It's just more the fact that they did this at all, and the results don't matter to him. He says, I went to Il Bastone. Your notes were everywhere. How close were you? I told you both there would be consequences. I didn't want to be put in this position. No? Then you should have listened to us. And when they don't answer, he tells them they're like barred from the use of Lethe, that you're not part of this anymore, yada, yada, yada. They don't answer. And then he says, I need verbal confirmation. And Dawes says she understands, but Alex tries to be like, you're making a real mistake with Dawes. Kick me out, sure, but Dawes, nah, not a good choice. I don't deserve your contempt, Alex. I offered to help you, and you looked me in the eye and lied to me. A bitter laugh escaped her. You didn't offer to help me until you knew I had something you wanted. You were using me, and I was happy to whore for you for the right price. So let's not pretend there was something noble in that transaction. And he says, you don't belong here. You never have. Crass, uncouth, uneducated. And I'm just like, I love this because this is so real. The very people who are doing the most profane shit, they're cutting open homeless people and reading stock tips in their entrails, calling her uncouth and crass because she swears. Like, you know, like, truly suck 1,000 cocks. Truly, truly forever. And Dawes stands up for her and says, Alex fought for him when nobody else would. You guys turned your backs. And he's like, you guys were ready to risk everybody's lives for this thing when you didn't even know what it would do. So don't pretend you're heroes. You broke every rule, and Dawes says your rules are shit. And I was like, Dawes said your rules are shit. Dawes is such a rule follower. For her to just be like, fuck you, fuck your rules. I was like, oh, we got a radical on our hands now. I got very excited about this. She saluted Anselm with both middle fingers and followed Dawes out of Eden. That's a really good way to say this because, you know, everything that she's had here has meant something to her. I like that. I like the fact that turning her back on Yale and everything with Lethe isn't a no-brainer for Alex. She has had a hard, rough life. And everything that she has, like, enjoyed over the past year has been precious to her. This is not an easy thing. That doesn't mean that there was a single question that she should take, risk everything. But it wasn't an easy thing to lose either. And good. It shouldn't be. Things should cost, you know? It sucks. But that's what makes anything worth anything. So yeah, that's the end of that chapter. I knew I read that part. Thank God. I got real scared there for a second. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Joanna, for commissioning this. Appreciate you a lot. Thank you to everybody who's listening. Hope you're enjoying. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.